going to use Slack, it's the current up-and-coming popular thing, but everything we're showing you in the talk today would work equally well with HipChat, it would work equally well with email, and it would work equally well with any other kind of notification system. We've just chosen Slack because it's the one that we're familiar with at Redgate, and as has been shown, it's the one that people here, it's the most popular as well. Cool. So I came into Slack this morning and I got a notification from Tom, who's our application developer, and this is from October the 12th, which is 4 days ago, and I still haven't got back to him yet. And he's still waiting on the database changes for this new feature. So let's just write back to him. Cool. So let's go ahead and make this change. Now, I feel really bad because I've been letting this thing slip, and I know I shouldn't, but I'm just going to do this straight on production. Now, I really shouldn't be doing this, but Beth, can anyone see Beth anywhere? No, she's not here. She won't know. And I'll just do this thing straight on production, and then it will just be done, right? The application developers can use the thing. They won't have to chase me about this thing again, because if I do it in a testing environment, they're just going to pester me to put it in production a bit. So I'll just do this thing straight on production. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go into SSMS, and we'll open a new query window. Let's get a new query window up on the screen. So to start with, this query window goes bright red. That's SQL prompt. That's one of the SQL prompt features. SQL prompt is our IntelliSense tool, which hopefully pretty much everyone has heard of SQL prompts. Yeah, quite a lot. Cool, so connection coloring is one of the new features in prompt. And it's bright red because this is production, but you know, we'll just ignore that. And then I'm going to go ahead and make the change. So here's a SQL prompt snippet, because otherwise you'd realize quite how bad I am at typing. So we've got here a function which is going to count the number of words in in a single article. And the way it's going to do that is it's going to go through the article character by character. Is this character space? Is this character space? Is this character space? And it's going to keep track of the number of spaces. And at the very end, it takes the number of spaces, which is basically the number of words, and divides it by 250, because on average, people can read about 250 words a minute. So let's go ahead and execute that. So that's that function now in production. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to alter the view. So when the application code talks to the database, it goes via a view. So let's just go ahead and alter the view to expose the results of calling that function to the application code. So we'll just go and do dba dot and then that function, which is that. And then we'll just pass it the varchar max, which is the article. And we'll give this column a name, which is the estimated reading time. And then we'll just apologize, this laptop often presses the C key down, but so bear with me if that happens. And now my mouse doesn't work. Better. Cool. So execute that. So I've now gone ahead and made the change to the view. Let's just test what I've done. Again, I'm using SQL prompt SSF. Let's just take a look from that view. Let's just look at the first one, and you can see that the estimated reading time is 4 minutes for this kind of short article. So at this point, I'm done. That's it. My job is done. Given this only took a couple of minutes, probably shouldn't let it slip for 2 weeks, but we'll ignore that. And let's go ahead and tell my application developers that it's done. Cool. So I think at this point, my job is done. Yeah. At some point, the application dev will notice this, but that's it. I'm done. I'm going to have a coffee because that was, yeah. Meanwhile, over in DBA land.
So yeah, today I'm going to be playing the part of SimpleTalk's DBA, and my job is to make sure that everything is running smoothly on production. So I get into work this morning, and it's going fine so far until I go into Slack and in the operations channel where we get all our automated notifications. I spot that DLM dashboard is telling me that there's something changed on SimpleTalk production. This is a surprise to me because I knew that we were working on this estimated reading time feature, but I was pretty certain that it wasn't finished off yet. And I'm not expecting a deployment to production today, so already this is kind of ringing alarm bells a bit for me. So I want to find out what is going on here. So you guys probably saw DLM dashboard in the keynote, but basically what it is, it's a monitoring tool that Redgate makes, and it keeps track of what schemas are on all your databases. So here we can see our other databases look fine, they're green, but production, as we saw in that notification, has gone red. So this this is particularly worrying. Not only has the schema changed, but the schema has changed to something that that Dashboard has never seen before. It's brand new, and normally I'd expect all the changes to go through previous environments and for it to be recognized. So yeah, this is a worry, and I want to find out what these changes are. So let's go ahead and review that and take a look. And yeah, so Dashboard is going to show me if it feels like loading today. Here we go. So what I can see here, so this is SimpleTalk production. It used to be on this version 0.62, and now it's drifted to this new schema. And so the first things I found out, right, we've changed the function, we changed the view. And who made the changes? Well, it was David. So that's a useful piece of information already. I know who to chase about this.
She also knows that because tables aren't listed there, she knows that there's been no change to any of the table schema. So at least I didn't actually destroy any data.
Yeah, so this is kind of, I can calm down a little bit because I know that we haven't lost data from here. But I still want to know what's happening. So I'm going to take a look at these changes. And there's this function, okay, and this view that he's changed. But let's take a look at that function because, yeah, as David mentioned, this is going through every single character in the article, and that might work for a short article, but on a long article, that's going to be a problem. Okay, and actually I noticed back in Slack now that Slack's got another message for me, so let's take a look at that. And SQL Monitor is now yelling at me and telling me that there are a bunch of long-running queries. SQL Monitor, another monitoring tool, but what this does is it monitors the performance. So in this case, it sent me I've set up some alerts to check for long-running queries. And here we can see that there are quite a few long-running queries. So let's find out the details of those. Sorry about this.
Refresh the tab, see what happens.
Okay, it's still loading. It claims to be loading. So I can still find out a bit of information about from the query, but from the alert that is being raised. But obviously, oh, here we go. Let's try loading it again.
So to be fair, the SQL server is also on the same laptop, and it's under quite a lot of load right now running that query. So.
Right, here we go. So what SQL Monitor is giving me now is it's giving me the opportunity to investigate what's actually going on with that long-running query. So I can see here, firstly, yep, this is on SimpleTalk production again. So already I'm suspicious that this is something to do with the changes that David just pushed to production. But now I look here and I can see what's causing this problem, and that's the exact same function that we saw before. So at this point, this is causing quite a lot of slowdown. Like that query took 45 seconds to run. That's pretty bad. So I want to get this off production as quickly as possible. And now if I go back to Dashboard, so I want to roll this back. Because of the change that were made, I know there wasn't any data involved, so I don't need to worry about faffing around restoring a backup. And what I can see from Dashboard here is I can see not only the version that it's on now, but the version that it's changed from. And so if you look, you can see that it used to be, that this used to be on SimpleTalk 4262, which is actually the version that still is on acceptance now. So that makes my job a bit easier. I can go straight to SSMS and just deploy from acceptance to production. This is something that I do quite frequently just to see what the differences are, so I've already got this set up as a SQL Compare project. What I want to do is straightforward. I'm going to launch SQL Compare. I want to compare the schemas of acceptance and production, get my deployment script going, and to get so that the monitor stops screaming at me. And I know that SimpleTalk is under quite a lot of load right now because it's slowing everything on this laptop down. So I want to get this fixed for our users as soon as possible. Here we go. So yeah, we're going from acceptance, we're going to production. Let's compare and get that back. Okay. Okay, So let me just check that it's definitely going to happen. It's going to delete that function as I expected, and it's going to change the view. I want to get that deployed.
The talk should get a lot faster once we've put the change.
Right now, okay. Let's go. Okay, so now I can start to relax a bit because I know that SQL Compare is starting to do what I wanted it to do. And I'm going to go back to dashboard and wait for this deployment to finish, because as dashboard is going to monitor all the schema changes, it means it can also tell me when it's finished deploying these changes to production. Oh, sorry, I can close this now. There we go. Right. Oh. So that's recompared. So SQL Compare tells me the same. And in dashboard, we come back here, and now what we can see is that it says this is a rollback. It's an update to a version that dashboard knows about. We'll review that to make sure the changes are all correct. So you can see now dashboard is saying this is a rollback from one version to the same version. And now the changes are made not only by David, but by me as well. So to have a look at these, the same function, there is no diff to display what's changed because it's changed back to the same thing it was before. You can see that firstly, David made his changes using SSMS, and now I've made my changes using SQL Compare. I want to kind of keep track of this to make sure I remember what's happened. So I'm going to put a comment in here. Back David's changes that slowed down. And that's in the record now, so I can make sure I go back and remember. If I look at the history here, I can see what's happened and it changed a few objects, but also I know what went on there. There's a comment that makes it make sense to me. So
it's probably worthwhile reinforcing at this point the audit tool features of dashboard. So if we go back to the home page, we can see that yes, production is green, but if we click on the little history icon, we can see what's been going on production over time, which is this page. So even though production is now fine, dashboard has still got the record that this change happened. And if we click back to see changes here, we can see we're back on the page we were on before, and we can see that for about 9 minutes, it had my change, but it didn't have Beth's rolling back. So this is really nice for compliance situations where you can go in and you can give the history of how the database is moving between schemas, moving between acknowledged schemas, and then within an acknowledgement, you can see the individual SQL executions and how long each one was on production for.
Yeah, so if we wanted to, I could download that SQL and check again what it was that David ran to make these changes. So now my day's got a bit better. SQL Monitor should have stopped yelling at me because these alerts should have all cleared up when I deployed those changes. So I'm going to select all of these and clear them, so I know next time if something comes up, what's going on. So I can take a break to recover now. So let's take a step back and talk about what happened. This scenario, someone making changes to production and not telling anyone, is something we hear people complaining about a lot. And it's because it's a real pain point. If someone makes a change and fails to communicate about it, it can cause real problems, and you might not even know about it. In this case, David made some changes, and they were causing a serious slowdown on production, as you saw.
So in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done it in the first place. But if I was going to do it, I should at least have told Beth what was going on. But I was in a hurry and I didn't. And okay, even though I had good intentions, it's still my bad. Now, the problem here is a lack of communication. And the point is that the Redgate tools, DLM dashboard spotting the schema change, SQL Monitor spotting the performance slowdown, and then Slack as a central communication hub that we can, and the operations channel there where we can see what was going on. So we can see that at the top, we've got the 2 drifts from DLM dashboards. I made the function, the view change, SQL Monitor finding all of these long-running queries, and then DLM dashboard spotting that Beth has rolled back the schema. So the point here is the lack of the communication and how the Redgate tool spotted that there was basically me doing something bad, and then alerting Beth to that point.
Yeah. So the thing is that communication is it's actually a hard problem in a small company, but even in a big company, like making sure that everyone is talking to each other is really hard. And it's, I genuinely might not have known about what was going on. The thing about using SQL Monitor and DLM Dashboard, it means you don't have to rely on people telling you what they're doing, because, these things happen, and it's not even always someone trying to be sneaky. The reason we've got the tab coloring SQL prompt is people genuinely sometimes make changes to production by accident. But also, in this case, David just didn't realize how bad his change could be. He didn't deliberately introduce a bug on production. He was just trying to help the application developers out.
And we got lucky this time. Beth was in the office, she spotted it really quickly, and the problem was easy to fix. But it was just as simple as using SQL Compare, as you saw, to put things back as they were before. I hadn't caused any data loss, and so there was no need to restore from a backup. Of course, if we did have to restore from backup, then it would have taken longer and longer, and SimpleTalk gets about 700,000 views a month or something, so it's every single moment that site's down is obviously causing problems for the users. So it was good we got it back up and running quickly.
But so all this monitoring is really useful, and in this case it helped me find out about the problem and it helped me fix it. But I don't think it's just about fixing things when they've broken. I would much rather be proactive and have a process that means these things don't break in the first place at all. So in the second half of this talk, we want to talk about how you can actually do that. So let's go back to the office and find out. So now I've rolled back these changes, I can settle down and have a think and try and work out what to do next. Because my major concern now it's fixed is I want to make sure this doesn't happen again. This is a panicky situation. That's not what I want to spend my job time doing. Kind of what I'd really like to do is just remove David's permissions from production altogether and just block him from doing it. So first, I think that only solves my problem in the short term. Partially because he's not the only developer who could do this, but also because he's done this once before, and if he wants, he clearly wants to deploy to production, and if he's probably going to try and find another way to work around it in the future. So I would rather find a process that lets him do what he needs to do, but works for both of us. I want to make it easy for him to do it my way, so he will actually do what I want him to do. So at the moment, David thinks he needs production access, so I need to go and ask him, find out what he actually needs it for. So David, those changes you deployed to production earlier?
Yes, Beth?
I've had to take them off because they caused this massive slowdown. But I don't want to stop you from being able to do your job. What happened this morning, and why is it you want to deploy straight to production?
Okay, so this morning I was being hassled by the application developers, and I just wanted this change to be done. And I felt really bad that it had taken me so long to actually get around to start working on this thing. And I just wanted it to be done and out the door, basically. And if I'd done this on a testing environment, they'd have hassled me in a couple of days, asking, can we have this thing on production now? And I was just fed up of the hassling and making them feel like I was blocking them. So I just did it on production, and it was done. I mean, the app devs didn't seem to mind.
So I think there are two things that I can identify that you want from that, and so the first half of that is needing to be able to get the changes to the application developers easily so you don't block them. And the second half of it is you need a way either for you to deploy to production to get that done, or for them to deploy to production when they need to. And again, trying not to block anyone and stop anyone getting their job done. So that's what you need. And what I need is a way of doing all this that keeps me in the loop, because I need to protect production. Is that a fair analysis?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, crucially, if the application developers can go and deploy to production without me, then that would make my life a lot easier.
Okay, so I have a process that I'm going to suggest. I'm going to show you what's possible. So let me there are a few things involved here, so let me give a quick overview first. So for the whole deployment stuff, we're going to use Octopus Deploy, which you guys will have seen in the keynote. And Octopus is what we're actually going to interact with here, and that's the thing that's going to let you deploy, and the applications developers deploy really quickly. Let me go to the SimpleTalk project here. So there's Octopus Deploy, which is the tool that's actually going to do the work, and Redgate's built plugins for that, which is what we're going to use today. Then there's what's going on behind the scenes and what is going to do all the automated work that saves us time, and that's Teamcity. So we don't need to spend too much time here, because actually you don't need to interact with this on a day-to-day basis. This is just the automated stuff that works behind the scenes. then we've got, so those are the sides of it that are doing the work. And then there's the other side of it, which is the communication side. So firstly, we're going to use dashboard, and dashboard is what's going to tell us, basically is what's going to keep everyone in the loop, because dashboard knows what the schemas on the databases actually are, so it can tell us what's changing. And finally, we're going to use our team communication tool, which is Slack. But again, as we've said before, this would work equally well with email. You don't have, or HipChat, you don't have to be using Slack. So I'm going to show you an overview of what's going on. I'm going to use dashboard as a visualization of that. So David, you spend your time, in theory, working in development databases when you're not working on production. So you care about this one end of the pipeline, but you also care about the other end of the pipeline, which is production. The thing is, we've got actually all these databases in the middle here that we can use as well to save us time. So firstly, there's the integration environment. And that's an environment we can use to just dump all the changes from development and stick them together. Then there's testing, which is a more formalized environment, which you and the application developers can use to check that all your changes work together. Acceptance, that's the database we're going to use to do a dry run of changes to production. And that's the point where I'm going to get involved and check that I'm happy with everything. And finally, of course, there's production. So we've got all these databases, and there's a bunch of automation linking these all together using the automation suite. So what's going to happen is you start out, it starts out by committing to source control. And if you commit to source control, then that kicks off all of the automation that's going to take you through the rest of these. So that's just an overview of what's going to happen, but actually there's a lot of detail there, and I think it's going to be much easier to go through the process. And I know Tom, the application developer, is probably still waiting on your change that you told him was there. So why don't we go through this process, but make to show you how it can be done. But the only problem was that change that you made, like, I don't want to run that and get that back into production. Can we find a different way of doing that?
Cool, so let's get up SSMS, and this time around we'll open a query window on dev, and SQL prompts connection coloring will go green, because that's where I should be making the change.
Good.
And that's not supposed to be doing that. Cool, so let's get that query window up. Cool, so previously what we were doing was sorry.
Has it got stuck?
I think the shift key is being held down or something. Cool, right. So previously this was the function we were using, and what it did was it counted the number of words and divided the number of words by 250. So this was only after an estimate of the reading time. It's kind of in the name of the function, but it's also in this divide by 250 here, which is only an estimate for how many words people can read on average per minute. So previously we were calculating an accurate number of words and then dividing it by 250. So why don't we just estimate the number of words? That way we don't need to look at every single character. So what we're going to do instead is delete all this code, and crucially we're going to delete that while loop, which was what was causing the time. And this time around we're going to just replace it with the length of the input. So if we assume that on average words are about 5 characters in, say, English prose, so 5 characters for the average word, 1 character for the space. So then if we divide that by 5 plus 1, which is 6, that will tell us an estimate for the number of words. Again, we can divide that by 250, which is the estimated number of words that people can read a minute. And so this will give us an estimate for the reading time of the article. And now, crucially, because SQL Server can work out the length of a string very, very quickly, this is going to be a lot faster than before and much high performing.
And result in a happy Beth.
And result in a happy Beth, yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and also change that view. Basically, we're going to make exactly the same change to the view that we made before. So we will just add a new row to the view. So call calculate estimate of the reading time, and we'll pass in the varchar max, which is the article, and then we'll just name that the estimated reading time column, and click execute there as well. So that's it. We've now altered the view, and we've got the function as well. Let's just test that very quickly. So if we just select from the articles, we can see that we've got all of our estimated reading times here, which is yeah, it looks like one of our articles is particularly long. It's almost like someone just put a book into Simple Talk or something. That might have what was causing the slowdown on production, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, those are the estimated reading times for all the articles. So it looks like that feature is working, and then particularly it's working even with a very long article. That query took no time at all. So we can now go ahead and commit those to source control.
Yeah, so this is going to be the stage where source control is we've got the changes that we want to make and we can commit them to source control. And that means what that is going to do is it's going to share our changes. So normally the reason people start using source control is to share changes between developers. But the great thing about it is it can also share changes to systems. And that's the thing we're going to use today as the basis for all this automation. So let's put in a commit comment here. And we're going to commit that to source control. So that commit has now set off the groundwork in our build server that is going to set up all the rest of the deployments later on. So I'll show you Teamcity quickly. Go and again. Let's go to Teamcity quickly. So this is Teamcity, which is a build server that we've installed the DLM automation suite on to do the continuous integration for database. Did anyone go to Brian Randall and Alex Yates's talk on ALM for the database? Yeah, so you'll know quite a bit about this already. And they did a demo using the Microsoft stack. We're going to use Teamcity and Octopus Deploy. Basically, the point is that the stuff Redgate has built is going to plug into all these systems. It doesn't really matter what you're using to do the build system. And we don't want to overlap with that talk, so we're not going to talk about the technical details of this or of lifecycle management in general, or the setup. What we really want to talk about is what I think is the interesting bit, what you can do with all of this stuff, because it can help teams work together better. If you are interested in exploring the setup or looking at how this works in detail, there is a hands-on lab on continuous integration that you can do. So you can use that to find out about how all this is done, to give it a go yourself. There's hands-on labs on dashboard, on source control. So if you are interested in the source control step, which we did skim over today, that's something you can look at too. So back to what is actually going on here. So we committed the change that David made. This has kicked off an automated build and test process, and that's checking that the database builds to something that actually is functional. It will run our database tests against it. And then it creates the artifact which is going to be used for the rest of the deployment process. It's a database package. It's a database package that contains those schema changes. And that means that we know throughout the rest of the deployment process, it's those changes that will continuously be referred to, so we know exactly what we're deploying.
And the crucial thing about that is that once we test something in our testing environment and we sign it off, when we later promote that release from test environment to production, we know that what's going to be running on production is exactly the same thing that we signed off, because it's the schema definition that's in the package. So this means that any kind of previous problems we might have had where maybe we signed off one thing in test and something else appeared on production, and like, what did we test and what are we running, those kind of problems don't happen anymore, because what gets deployed to production is precisely the database schema that we ran the tests against. So all that business logic in the view stored procedures that we tested is exactly the same business logic that will turn up on production, because the package stays the same.
So we've shown you Teamcity, but actually now we don't need to look at it anymore, because this is just all the stuff that is running. What it is that we're going to look at is back to dashboard. So what we've chosen to set up for our integration environment is an automated deployment. And that's, for some environments, obviously you don't want to deploy without anyone checking them over. But for this integration database, actually we think it's okay. We're happy to have a database that just takes all of the changes, no matter what they are, and use that as the first step. So let's see. So Teamcity is now talking to Octopus Deploy to set up an automated deployment. And any second now, that should be coming through. It says it's done less than a second left. Come on.
While we're waiting for that,
Yeah.
does it support things like replication? So we need to make changes to tables that are being replicated. Does it also deal with data changes that may be as a result of the schema changes that you've done?
So replication is an interesting question. It could support replication better. So there's a SQL, so underneath the scenes, this is running SQL compare. So there's a SQL compare option which tries to help with replication, and it gets some of the cases correct, but not some of the other ones. So if you're familiar with SQL compare and whether the option works for replication for you. Then the other thing to mention is that right now Redgate are working on something called migration blocks, which will basically let you kind of mix data and schema changes together into the same deployment. If you've used the migrations feature in SQL Source Control before, either V1 or V2 beta, migration blocks is kind of our latest iteration of that. So that will help with doing database and schema changes together. So it's not as good as it could be with replication. We know that's one of the areas that we need to improve, and we're kind of taking steps to do that with migration blocks.
Yeah. Okay, so now this has come through to the integration, and there's a few changes here from what we saw in production before. Firstly, this isn't a drift, this has gone orange, which is an update. And you can see, instead of the integration database having updated to a mysterious unknown schema, it's updated to a schema with a known version number. And that's because with Teamcity and everything talking to each other, our continuous integration process sets up these version numbers. So let's just go and check that is
So the other thing it's got before we move on is it's got this extra line here. So this line here, which zoom in and then I can highlight it. So this line here is the integration with our SQL CI, which is the plugin to Teamcity. So this line here with the SQL CI product logo here basically means that this is a recognized package from Teamcity. So any badge that has that little line on it is coming from Teamcity. So even if we were to go in dashboard to sign something off and give it a name, it wouldn't get that magic line. So that magic line is saying this thing went through your build system and that was the build that it went from. Even if we go and rename it in dashboard to have a different name, that line means that it comes from the build system and hence is something that you've definitely seen go through the different build environments.
So we can have a quick look at that and check that these are the changes that we expected to see. So we get the diff, and this time the change is going to be made by SQL release, which is past the DLM automation suite, which is past the automation we set up. But these are all the changes we expected to see, and that's fine. So I'm going to acknowledge the changes and say it goes green. So yeah, in this talk, this has been the major thing we've concerned with, so we've had to sit around waiting. But actually, you can move on and do something else, and because we've got these automated notifications set up, what you can do instead is you can wait for Slack to tell you when it's done. So if someone cares about checking the integration environment, if they want to wait, instead of sitting here and waiting, they're just going to find out in Slack. So now Dashboard has sent this message here and said there's an update to SyncTalk integration.
So in the talk today, we've put all of the Slack messages into one channel, but you can have different messages for different environments going into different channels. And if there's some environments you don't really care about seeing messages for because they update all the time, it'll just be too spammy, you can filter them out entirely. So that's just how we've configured things.
So in this example, we might want to have a channel. So David might care about the integration updates so that he knows when he can get stuff into testing to share with the application developers. Whereas the application developers probably only want to care about that deployment to testing. So let's go ahead and do that next bit now. Here we go. We're in Octopus Deploy. We should refresh, and now we'll be able to see that new release that we were just talking about. That's already been deployed by it to integration. But now it comes to deploy to testing. So now this is running. This tool, again, you'll have seen this in the keynote. This is Octopus Deploy. And like Teamcity, it was originally designed to deal with application development. But with the DLM automation suite, we've plugged in to Octopus Deploy, and this lets you deploy databases alongside your applications. So like we said, this links up with the previous stuff we just saw from Teamcity. It's the same package that was deployed to integration. And we can confirm that in Dashboard because we'll be able to see as we go through the pipeline the exact same changes get deployed. For this, we've got here, let me show you the environments we have. Like you saw in Dashboard, we have integration testing, acceptance, and production. But Octopus Deploy is completely configurable in terms of the number of environments and the types of environments that you want. So you can make it fit your workflow. So here it matches up to Dashboard. Crucially, the difference between that is, these are the same environments, but they're telling you two different things. what Octopus Deploy is telling us with this table is it's saying these are the versions it knows it has deployed to these environments. Dashboard is the other side of that. It's the truth about what has actually been deployed. So it can tell you what are the schema versions genuinely on that database.
And the reason why this is useful is even if you've got a process like we've set up here, very occasionally you might need to make changes to production. Hopefully it's not the example that we had at the start of the talk, but maybe production's running slow and you want to add an index to it or something like that. And so when you're adding an index to production, DLM Dashboard will spot that index change and highlight it as an out-of-process change. And by making that index change more visible, you know that you can then bring that change back into the development environment so the developers are aware of the index change and then they can make sure that they test with that index in the future. So the point is that Octopus Deploy only knows about the stuff it deployed through the process. Whereas DLM Dashboard, because it's monitoring the database, gets to see everything. It gets to see the stuff that was deployed through the process and the index changes and any rogue developers changing things outside the process.
So in terms of David's first problem, which was sharing the changes with the application developers, this is done. They can find out in Slack that this deployment to testing, which is what they need to get the changes, that's there and ready to go for them. So that's the first half. But the next bit is to actually get those changes onto production, which is what we need to do now. So, David, let's have you, seeing as I've now showed you how to do a deployment to testing, let's go and do the next bit, which is getting ready for a deployment to production.
Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is just review the thing real quick in DLM Dashboard. The other thing that DLM Dashboard supports is being able to rename things. So 4263 is a pretty kind of arcane name. So let's say we want to provide a much better name to this. So I'm going to call this the Simple Talk October release. And then just click save. So what DLM Dashboard is letting me do is it's letting me kind of attach real names to these things. And now if we go back to the dashboard, we can see that we've got the Simple Talk October release on the testing environment. We've still got the row underneath, which tells us the build number that it built as from SQL CI. And this is just, again, to help with communication. Magic numbers often mean, like, we've got a whiteboard in the office with, like, which numbers are running where. And it's assigning names to things is so much easier. So let's just do that name. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and do that deployment to acceptance. So if I go ahead and click deploy here, and then click the deploy now button. So that's really interesting. It hasn't actually asked you to get involved, Beth. I thought we were designing the system to protect acceptance and production. It looked like I could just click the deploy button there.
So that's true, but this is also designed to block you as little as possible. So what Octopus Deploy is going to do is it's going to set up as much of the deployment as it can do before it gets me in the loop. So here what it's going to do is using that package again, it's going to create the actual deployment script that it's going to use to deploy to staging, and it's going to set that in stone. So that is the only deployment script you can use when it comes to deploy to production. So what this means is that I can review this script when it comes into acceptance. I can check over that I'm completely happy with it. And so I don't need, here we go. So I don't need to block anyone when it comes if they need to get something out into production. So
how about if you're not looking at Octopus Deploy? How will you know about this kind of thing?
And again, we come back to Slack. So in Slack, all I need to do is set up my notifications. And when this is ready, so it should be alerting me.
It should. It often takes a couple of seconds to update Slack, but a Slack message should appear telling Beth to go and take a look at the thing in Octopus Deploy.
In the meantime, let's just go and take a look at that. So we have what the most useful thing here is to take a look at the changes report. So I'm interested in a few things here. I'm interested in what these changes are. I don't know what. Here we go. Right. So back to Slack. So now I've had this notification saying there is a deployment to acceptance that requires approval. So let's have a look. This is waiting, and it's paused until I've had time to sign off on it. Right. So what we're going to see here is, again, the changes that you've seen a few times now, but in the real world, this would be the first time I get to look at them. And I can read through here, I can see what changes are being added, what changes are being modified. And if I want to, I can read through the entire deployment script that is going to be used to go to production and check that I'm completely happy with this, this as it's going to go. What this means is that once I've checked it over and if I'm okay with it to deploy to acceptance, to deploy to acceptance, that's a sign-off for production as well, because we have this environment acceptance that is a dry run. It means that I can be sure that that's going to be okay. So I'm going to say that's fine because I know I've seen these changes already.
Cool. There was also a warnings tab, which we highlighted in the keynote. There aren't any warnings here, but if there were any warnings, they'd show up in there. So generally, high priority warnings are things like data loss, so dropping a table, dropping a column, shrinking a column from one data type to another that's a bit smaller, maybe varchar 10 to varchar 5, for example. And then medium priority warnings are performance issues, like we have to do a table rebuild or that kind of thing. But there's no warnings here.
So again, we've been talking about this here, but in terms of communication, you can do all this automatically. So when David kicks off a deployment to staging, or when the application developers kick off deployment to staging, when that's ready for me to review, that's going to automatically tell me. And when I've reviewed that and that goes through to when that goes through to staging, again, the application developers or David can get an automated notification to say that's done. And that's good. It means not only, like, we don't have to remember to communicate with each other, but actually I don't think that's a very good use of people's time. Like, this information exists already, and instead of you saying, oh yeah, this thing has happened, we can automatically push that information out. So let's see how Octopus Deploy has got on with that. It should be finishing the deployment to acceptance, and we can see that change here. And so now the last bit in the puzzle is to just finish off and promote this deployment, promote this release to production. And you can set up the permissions how you like. In this situation, our application developers want to be able to get things into production when they're ready. So we can give them the rights to promote things to production, but not to sign things off in staging, which is the thing that I need to guard against. So this is flexible and configurable, and is allowing each member of our team to do what they need to do. And I think now we're pretty much it, because what we've gone over is we've seen how David can get changes into testing really easily, so he's happy with those, and so he can get those to the application developers. We've seen how the application developers can get changes to production when they need to, and we've seen how I can stay in the loop and make sure that I check over what's going on production. And finally, the final piece of the puzzle is going back to monitor and just making sure that production, now we've deployed this new change, is okay, and everything is all right here. We don't have any more alerts, so we know that we've fixed the problem that we started off with.
And from my perspective, I can go into Slack, and we can see the messages here that acceptance and production have both been updated. So this is a way that I can see that Beth has approved my deployment and that it's now sitting on production. So rather than me having to message the application developers saying, yes, this thing's on production now, they can just be subscribing to these updates.
So that's the full process.
Cool. So what you've seen in the talk today is a bad way to get changes into production. You saw me just kind of hacking on production to get my changes into production. And then you've seen two further improvements on that. The first improvement we made was monitoring. So we used the Redgate DLM dashboard tool to monitor the schema, and we used the Redgate SQL monitor tool to monitor the performance. And we used a communication hub like Slack, but it would work equally well with HipChat or email, as a way to receive notifications from those two tools about how the databases were changing in terms of their schema and in terms of their performance. So monitoring is better than not knowing at all, but it's not the thing you should be striving for. The thing you should be striving for is not having these things go wrong in the first place. And to do that, we talked about the second improvement, which was an improved process. We used the Redgate DLM automation suite, and in particular, two parts of that automation suite. The first is SQL CI, which is a plugin to a whole bunch of different continuous integration servers. In the demo today, we use Teamcity, but it works equally well on the Microsoft build and also on Bamboo and Cruise Control and Jenkins, and the list is endless. And we also use SQL Release, which is another part of the Redgate DLM automation suite, and we saw how that could plug into Octopus Deploy, so that once you click the button in Octopus Deploy, it will go ahead and do the deployment. We saw how you could add manual intervention steps that would pause the deployment for Beth to come along, and we also saw how for some environments like integration, we could deploy to automatically in every single build. And we also saw how monitoring still plays a part, even though we've got this improved process. So as we were moving the changes between the environments, DLM dashboard was monitoring what was running on these environments, and it was telling us in Slack that it was doing so. If we ever made an out-of-process change, like an index to production for a real kind of problem on production, again, DLM dashboard would show that, but for any hot fixes, it would show them with the red drift icon, whereas for any updates made through the process, it would show them as the orange icon. And that meant that we could instantaneously see if the monitoring tool was picking up something that was being deployed through process or being deployed out of process like an index. And although we didn't do it here, you can set up different Slack rules so that when you see a drift from DLM dashboard, which is what we got at the very beginning of the day, that drift is the out of process change. That could go into a different channel in Slack, whereas the updates are the more safer ones because they've come through our process. So they're just a notification of what's going on.
So the major problem we've tried to solve is basically one of communication. It's trying to make sure that whether you're the DBA or the developer, you know what's going on, and you can make sure that you're kept in the loop for changes that you need to care about, and try not, we're trying to make sure that people are not blocked. So yeah, all of these tools, there are hands-on labs for, so if you're interested, come along later and try these out. There's hands-on labs for dashboard, for automated deployment, for continuous integration, and for some of the other stuff we showed you, like SQL prompt. So yeah, if you're interested in trying those out, please give those a go. And that's it from us. Any questions? Yeah.
Do you actually have load testing tools that might have helped you catch the point from the queries?
We don't. We use
Profiler can do testing of some SQL queries. Yeah.
So yeah, if you write your own performance tests, then you can kind of use our stack to see how they perform, I think. So Ant's Performance Profiler is a profiler for applications. So it will tell you if the application is slow because it's accessing the disk or a third-party service or the database or just the C# code's inefficient. So yeah, if you've got your own...
Anything to help with baseline? So tell whether it's slow or not?
So SQL Monitor, so we don't, because we've just got this set up for today, but if you monitor your database over a series of weeks or months, it will show you what it expects to be normal performance, and it will show you kind of the regions that normal is in, so you can see whether something that you've just seen now, if that's one great spike that's out of the way, then that's not usual.
You used to have a load testing tool.
We did, it was called Ant's Load. Yeah.
For work.
Yeah, it was quite a long time ago. I think it was like 10, 15 years ago we had Ant's Load. It was, yeah.
A couple of questions. Can it cross domains? Because we have a non-production domain and a production domain.
So both Dashboard and Monitor support Windows Authentication and SQL Server Authentication. So the easiest way to cross domains is just to use SQL Server Authentication. And then as long as your firewall will let the traffic through, that's all fine.
Okay. And is the deployment process, is that a role-based security, or can you set it to be a role-based security?
So each of the products have got their own security model. So Monitor has got a security model in terms of restricting which accounts can see which things. Dashboard has got a security model as of 2 days ago when we released it, which again lets you enforce which users can see which things and which users can take which actions. Teamcity's got a security model and Octopus Deploy has got a security model. So in order to control clicking the button in Octopus Deploy, you need to use the Octopus Deploy permissions model to control who can click that button.
But that's pretty highly configurable, yeah.
Octopus Deploy is ridiculously configurable. There's even like a test feature for permissions because people often get them wrong because they're completely configurable and you can do anything you like. But so there's a test button to test the permissions in Octopus Deploy.
Any thought given to the DML being able to automatically create a rollback script?
The dashboard, yeah, that is something that we would love to do, and I don't know what the plans are for dashboard next.
No,
Yeah.
so the plan right now for Dashboard is to actually let people buy it. So at the moment it's a free tool. So yeah, we should have mentioned that earlier. So Dashboard's currently a free tool. You can monitor up to 10 databases with it. So the plan is to, for the next couple of weeks, is to let people actually buy it. We want to, the permissions feature we've shipped it's quite difficult to add users at the moment to actually grant people permissions. We want to make that a bit easier. And we also want to do some more integration with our CI offering. So you can start to see documentation in Dashboard for the database you're looking at. So rollback is one of the features people keep asking for. So it is one we're tracking, but right now we kind of want to focus on making the permissions easier to use and better integration with the CI environment so you can see documentation in Dashboard. Okay, so right now it's a free tool, so you can just install it in 2 places, and each one will give you 10. Sorry? Yeah, so on a more serious note, we're looking right now at what a paid-for version of Dashboard would look like and how many databases you'd get.
So it's really useful for us to know that that's what people want, and we'll bring that feedback back to the product managers. Okay. Yeah, so that's really useful for us to know.
Cool. Yeah, 3 digits is quite, we hear lots of people with 3-digit numbers. So.
I know you've acknowledged that there's sort of room for improvement on replication. I quite frequently use the SQL compare, and when we do actually use the source control you have to offer, it's using 2 different databases, and when I'm comparing development against production, we see all the replication sort of schemas, and it's quite nice to put out which ones are actually have changes against them, because we'd actually know.
Yes.
Would that be something you'd acknowledge? I know you've acknowledged it, but would it be something you're looking at the next version, or potentially?
So the best person to talk to is Sam's here today.
Yeah, we've got a representative from the Compare team.
So Sam's here from the Compare team. The most recent thing they've been doing actually is getting support for SQL Server 2016, because there are CTPs out at the moment, so we've kind of been adding support for 2016 features. Replication is one of the things they know about, and is one of the major headaches. In terms of right now, there is a filtering tool in both SQL Compare and SQL Source Control and Dashboard, so you can upload a filter to Dashboard and it will filter out some stuff. So if the replication objects have precise names, you can kind of, but it is a workaround. Yeah, the best person to talk to is Sam Blackburn, who is in that far corner near the toilets on the SQL Compare pop-up. And just, we know replication needs fixing, and every time someone says it, it kind of just creeps up and up and up. But unfortunately, 2016 features are above it at the moment.
How are we doing for time?
5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the information that I presume you're talking about yeah, so that's being sent by the Redgate SQL CI tool. The Redgate SQL CI tool is just a command line, so you can call it from any build system. We were demoing here with Teamcity, but any build system that can run command lines can just run the Redgate SQL CI tool, and then that can talk to Dashboard and send it the relevant information. So yeah, because it's a command line, it runs on any build tool basically.
So I noticed that in your dashboard you have just one, you move from one database to another. Do you plan to add support for environments?
Oh, so it does have, so in this example, we've just got one database for environment, but there's no reason you couldn't have more in each environment. It's just, we've just made it simpler by having one.
Yeah, so these labels here, so this is basically the environments. So this database, the Simple Talk testing database, is currently in the testing environment, and I can move it to any of the other environments. So yeah, is that what you were looking for, or something else? Yep, we can do that as well. So yeah, so if I just move it to integration, for example, the dashboard will refresh, and we can now see that the integration environment here has got the 2 different databases on top of each other. So if you've got more than one database per environment, they just stack up vertically, basically, which kind of, and then, so that's the way to do it, basically. Is that?
That would be a separate piece of configuration, but you could do that too.
You'd also have to configure Octopus Deploy, which knows kind of which databases in different environments to do that.
Cool. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. If you've got any more questions for us, just come and chat to us afterwards.
Cool.
Okay.